Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be discussing 10 ways people can and have been able to go to F1. And not just like this, like how they started basically, like not just karting, F4, F3, F2, F1, but how drivers actually started their career. So number 1 is actually karting, because obviously it's the most common. So this is probably the most common starting point to get to F1. Every driver on the current grid started in karting, and also some other older drivers such as Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna, Jenson Button, Nico Rosberg, many others started in karting. In karting, you should start in Bambino at the age of 6, then move up to Cadet at 8 years old. Next, you go to Minimax or Junior Rotax at 13, and then either Senior Rotax, IMA X30s, or shifter karts. Next is snowmobile racing. This probably sounds like a really weird starting point to get to F1, but that's actually how Gilles Villeneuve did it. Gilles Villeneuve's brave Vitruso style in Ferrari was founded on the beginnings of his motorsport career. When he became one of the world's top snowmobile oval racers. Starting out in 1969, Villeneuve's wild and fast way of riding earned him the Snowmobile World Championship in 1974 at the age of 22, while the year before he'd made enough money as a pro rider to buy his first Formula Ford and begin car racing in Canada when the snows had melted. Every winter there'd be 3 or 4 huge crashes, Gilles remembered later. I know what being thrown on ice at 90 miles an hour means. Next is skiing. Yes, this sounds even more bizarre than the last, but 2 drivers actually started this way. Gilles Villeneuve and Davina Galacia did it. So like his father, Gilles Villeneuve's first experience of competition was on snow. Unlike his father though, old Gilles had to power him with gravity, with Gilles' boy growing up competing in downhill skiing events. If you're a good skier, then there is a good chance you should be a good racing driver, Villeneuve wrote in his autobiography. You have to choose the right lines, have good hand-eye coordination and a sense of balance. Similarly, before reaching F1 in 1976, Divina Glacia had already competed in 4 Winter Olympics, captaining the British women's Olympic ski team twice, as well as setting the British women's downhill speed record at a terrifying 124 miles per hour. Motocross. This one seems a bit more realistic than the last 2, but only 2 drivers has started in motocross and made it to F1. That driver was Mark Blundell. Mark Blundell's ability to hang on to a savage machine was learned on UK's motocross tracks, with Blundell competing in the sport from 14 to 17 before switching over to cars. When I jumped from motocross into Formula Ford 1600, my lines were in the wet were very different to most, Blundell told F1 official podcast Beyond the Grid earlier this year. I was going into a corner and I'd right angle it, shortcut, almost stop and start again, like a motocross bike. That's how I looked at a circuit, and I was used to having 36 competitors, so nothing fazed me about going into turn 1 with a guy next to me at 120 miles per hour. The next was Kimi Räikkönen, who started in motocross after following his brother Rami, who also enjoyed the sport. At the age of 8, however, he moved over to karting with his brother after making his Formula One debut and winning his title. He moved over to road rallying with his brother in 2010, and in 2011 trying NASCAR, and then made his way back to F1. Rally Raid. Five-time champion Juan Fangio was 38 when he made his Formula One debut, but he already had lots of experience in motorsport, not on racetracks but on savage rallies in South America. Driving beefed-up Chevrolets and Fords, Fangio became a national hero in Argentina in the 1940s for his daring exploits, before deciding to focus his attention on circuit racing, possibly prompted by an accident during one stage of a grueling 10,000-kilometer race from Buenos Aires to Caracas that killed his co-driver Daniel Urrutia. Motorcycle racing. So this is probably the second most common starting point, with 4 drivers starting this way. You must drive cars, John. Mike Horton had teased reigning 350cc and 500cc motor champion John Surtees in 1958. Is stand-up easier? 2 years later, Surtees had not only taken Horton's advice, but made his Formula One debut at the 1960 Monaco Grand Prix, going on to become 1964 world champion with Ferrari to add to 7 first-class motorcycle titles. Surtees had blazed a trail for for a number of other motorcycle riders too, with Mike the Bike Halewood, Johnny Scassetto, and Damon Hill all deciding to switch from 2 to 4 wheels and having a tilt at F1. In 1996, Champion Hill went even further than that, claiming that his experience as a motorcycle messenger in his youth, and particularly sliding his dispatch bike around London's old strewn Belgrave Square, put him in a good stead for handling wayward F1 cars years later. Gross track. Without the money to compete in go-karting as a teenager, Martin Brundle was forced to learn racing a different way by blasting home-built Ford Anglia around muddy fields in rural England. From the age of 12, glamorous it wasn't, but grass track racing, as the sport is known, was still an excellent schooling, according to Brundle, especially when it came to facing the muscular tactics of F1 drivers like Michael Schumacher in F1. When I had drivers trying to push me off track, it was nothing for me, Brundle told Motorsport Magazine's podcast in 2018. Every time Schumi, when I was his teammate, or anyone would try pushing me off the road, it was like, that's nothing, mate, compared to having a Ford Zephyr coming at you backwards. You can't frighten me. Number 8, dirt track racing. Similar to Brundle's exploits on grass, F1 world champion Sir Jack Brabham and Mario Andretti got their motorsport starts on dirt in Australia and the US, respectively. Former aircraft mechanic turned to garage owner Jack Brabham was a champion midget racer on the dirt ovals of New South Wales before switching over to tarmac and competing in his first Grand Prix in 1955. The early days in the midgets sharpened my reactions, Brabham would later recall. I think it really helped me driving in the rain. Dirt ovals too lit the fuse of Mario Andretti's storied racing career, when the Italian immigrant getting his first taste of competition at the local track in his adopted hometown of Nazareth, Pennsylvania, behind the wheel of a Hudson Hornet stock car built alongside his twin brother, Aldo. BMX. Alex Wurz may never have been a world champion in Formula One, but he was in BMX. winning the 1986 World Championship at the age of 12, having been inspired to get into sport by watching a film called E.T. And learning to handle top-level competition, deal with sponsors, and most of all, train his first-class athletes was a great preparation for his F1 career. Reckon works. His fitness was one of the key parts in why I succeeded, and got contracts to works told the Beyond the Grid in 2019, and that was down to BMX because I love being fit. I love the hard training aspect, and I continued all the way until today to train very hard. Number 10. This is the last one. It's a surprise. Many drivers such as Lance Stroll, Nicholas Latifi, and Nikita Mazepin have started like this. It's not very difficult, and it doesn't require much talent. Are you ready? It's becoming a pay driver!